Let me talk to you for a moment, especially if you've ever had to pick yourself up quietly. No applause, no audience, just you, your tears, your prayers, and your strength. There comes a point in a woman's life where she gets tired, not of loving, not of caring, but of bleeding in silence for someone who never truly noticed the cost. And one day, something changes, not overnight, not magically, but slowly, she chooses peace. Now, here's what most people don't understand. Moving on peacefully doesn't mean you didn't care. It doesn't mean you forgot. It doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It means you finally chose yourself over chaos. And when that happens, something powerful takes place on the other side, something rarely talked about but deeply felt. Because when a man sees that you've moved on peacefully, not bitter, not loud, not chasing, not trying to prove anything, it hits different. There's no argument to win, no guilt trip to respond to, no emotional door left open, just calm, just growth, just distance wrapped in dignity. And that does something to the mind. It forces reality to show up. Today, we're going to talk about what really happens emotionally when a woman moves on peacefully, and why your silence, your growth, and your joy speak louder than any explanation ever could. When a woman chooses peace after emotional disappointment, it is not an accident and it is not weakness. It is the clearest evidence of emotional growth. Peace is not passive, it is intentional. It is the result of lessons learned the hard way, boundaries built through pain, and self-awareness developed through reflection. When a man sees that kind of peace, it sends a message louder than words ever could, because peace reveals what arguments, explanations, and emotional outbursts never can: growth. Emotional growth happens when a woman stops reacting and starts responding to life differently. Before peace, emotions often control behavior. There is anxiety about being chosen, fear of being forgotten, and a constant need for reassurance. But once growth takes place, the need to prove worth disappears. Peace shows that she no longer needs external validation to feel complete. That shift is powerful because it breaks an unspoken expectation that her happiness depends on someone else's attention. Peace also reflects self-worth. A woman who has grown emotionally understands that her value does not decrease because someone failed to see it. She no longer negotiates her dignity or explains her pain to someone committed to misunderstanding it. Instead of trying to convince, she conserves her energy. That conservation of emotional energy is a sign of maturity. It tells the world, I know who I am, and I no longer need to fight to be respected. From an educational perspective, peace functions as a psychological signal. Human beings are conditioned to associate emotional reactions with attachment. When reactions stop, the mind searches for reasons. A man observing peaceful detachment often interprets it as strength, because strength is quiet. Weakness seeks attention. Strength maintains composure. That composure forces recognition that the woman has outgrown the emotional cycle that once defined the connection. Another critical aspect of peace is emotional regulation. Emotional growth teaches a woman how to feel deeply without acting impulsively. She still remembers, she still feels, but she does not let emotions control her actions. This level of regulation often surprises people because it contradicts stereotypes about emotional behavior. Peace demonstrates mastery over emotions rather than suppression of them. It is not numbness, it is control. Peace also removes dependency. Dependency creates imbalance, and imbalance creates power struggles. When a woman grows emotionally, she stops placing her emotional stability in someone else's hands. Her peace comes from within, not from consistency or inconsistency outside of her. This independence changes how she is perceived. She is no longer predictable through emotional triggers, and unpredictability rooted in strength commands attention. Growth through peace also reflects acceptance. Acceptance does not mean agreement with what happened. It means acknowledgement without resistance. A woman who accepts reality stops trying to rewrite the past or demand accountability from someone unwilling to give it. She redirects that energy toward building a healthier future. This acceptance is often mistaken for indifference, but in truth, it is resolution. And resolution closes emotional doors without slamming them. Peace is also the outcome of learning patterns. Emotional growth comes from recognizing cycles that no longer serve you. When a woman breaks a cycle silently, it signals that she has learned a lesson. There is no need for drama, because drama belongs to repetition, not evolution. Silence paired with peace communicates that the chapter is closed not out of anger, but out of understanding. From a behavioral standpoint, peace challenges expectations of emotional pursuit. Many people expect tears, questions, or attempts to reconnect. When those do not happen, the absence becomes noticeable. Peace creates contrast. It highlights what used to exist by showing what no longer does. That contrast often causes reflection because it exposes the value of what was once accessible but is now gone. Peace also reinforces boundaries. Emotional growth teaches a woman that boundaries are not punishments, they are protections. She does not announce them, she lives them. Her peaceful distance becomes the boundary. This teaches others how to treat her without her saying a word. Boundaries expressed through peace are often the most effective because they are enforced consistently. Another important element is dignity. Peace preserves dignity. Emotional growth prioritizes self-respect over emotional release. A woman who moves on peacefully chooses not to sacrifice her dignity for temporary relief. That choice leaves a lasting impression because dignity cannot be undone. It stays long after words are forgotten. Peace also shifts identity. When a woman grows emotionally, she stops identifying herself through the lens of a relationship or connection. She becomes whole on her own. This wholeness is visible in how she carries herself, speaks, and moves forward. That shift is unsettling to anyone who once saw her as emotionally dependent because it changes the narrative entirely. Finally, peace is the ultimate sign of closure. Not closure given, but closure created. Emotional growth teaches that closure does not come from conversations, it comes from clarity. When a woman reaches clarity, she no longer needs answers from someone else. Her peace confirms that the lesson has been learned, the value has been reclaimed, and the future has priority over the past. In the end, peace is not silence, it is a statement. It says, I have grown, and growth, when seen clearly, is impossible to ignore. When emotional access is removed, something powerful happens inside the human mind. It turns inward. Detachment does not shout, accuse, or demand explanation. It simply steps back, and in doing so, it creates space. That space becomes uncomfortable because it forces reflection. When a woman detaches peacefully, she removes the emotional mirror that once reflected reassurance, attention, and familiarity. Without that mirror, a man is left alone with his own thoughts, and that is where self-reflection begins. Self-reflection often starts with confusion. The mind struggles to understand why there is no reaction, no pursuit, no emotional pull. This confusion is not about loss at first, it is about disruption of expectation. Humans are conditioned to anticipate patterns. When a familiar emotional response disappears, the brain searches for meaning. Silence becomes loud because it leaves room for unanswered questions, and those questions demand internal answers. Detachment also removes distraction. Emotional engagement, even in conflict, provides stimulation. Arguments, explanations, and emotional exchanges keep attention outward. When that engagement ends, there is nothing left to focus on but the self. This is when thoughts that were previously avoided begin to surface. Regret, curiosity, comparison, and memory all rise in the absence of distraction. Another critical factor is the loss of emotional feedback. Emotional access allows a person to measure their impact. When someone knows they can still trigger emotion, they feel relevant. Peaceful detachment removes that feedback loop. Without reactions, there is uncertainty. That uncertainty often leads to self-questioning. Did I matter more than I realized, or what changed? These questions are not asked aloud, but they echo internally. Detachment also reframes the past. When emotional access ends, memories are no longer softened by present connection. The mind begins to replay moments with new perspective. Things once overlooked gain meaning. Words once dismissed carry weight. Self-reflection is often fueled by contrast. How things felt when emotional access was available versus how they feel now without it. From a psychological standpoint, detachment interrupts ego comfort. The ego thrives on assurance and familiarity. When someone knows they still have emotional influence, it feeds a sense of importance. Peaceful detachment removes that assurance without confrontation. This quiet removal is powerful because it does not attack the ego directly. It deprives it of validation. Deprivation forces awareness. Detachment also triggers accountability, even without confrontation. When there is no one left to blame, the mind turns inward. Emotional distance eliminates external targets for frustration. This often leads to recognition of one's own role in the outcome. Reflection deepens when there is no argument to deflect responsibility. Another important element is the shift in power dynamics. Emotional access creates leverage. Detachment removes it. When leverage is gone, the imbalance becomes visible. This visibility can be uncomfortable because it exposes dependency that may not have been acknowledged before. Self-reflection grows in this discomfort as the mind attempts to restore equilibrium. Detachment also highlights absence more than anger ever could. Anger still connects. Detachment disconnects. This absence forces recognition of what is no longer available. Recognition leads to reflection, and reflection leads to reassessment of value. Value is often realized most clearly when access is lost. The peaceful nature of detachment is what makes it effective. Aggressive withdrawal can be dismissed as emotional reaction. Peaceful withdrawal cannot. It signals intention and control. That control challenges assumptions and invites deeper thought. The calmness suggests decision rather than impulse, and decisions carry weight. Another layer of self-reflection comes from comparison. When a woman moves on peacefully, her stability becomes a silent standard. The mind naturally compares past dynamics to the present reality. This comparison often leads to the realization that the emotional security once provided is no longer accessible. That realization deepens introspection. Detachment also disrupts identity narratives. Many people define themselves through how others respond to them. When emotional access ends, that identity is challenged. The mind begins to question how it was perceived and what role it truly played. These questions are a form of self-examination that would not occur without detachment. Silence also invites imagination. When answers are not given, the mind fills in the gaps. This mental activity keeps reflection alive. Unlike arguments which have endings, unanswered silence continues working in the background. Thoughts revisit themselves, evolving over time. Over time, peaceful detachment teaches a lasting lesson. Emotional access is not guaranteed. This realization reshapes future behavior and awareness. Whether acknowledged outwardly or not, the internal shift occurs. Reflection leaves an imprint because it changes understanding. In the end, detachment is not about punishment. It is about clarity. When emotional access is removed, clarity enters. And clarity forces self-reflection, not because it is demanded, but because it becomes unavoidable. Conflict often disguises itself as communication, but in reality, it is a form of connection. Arguments, emotional reactions, and repeated discussions keep people psychologically tied to one another. When conflict exists, there is still access, there is still influence, there is still a sense of involvement. When a woman removes conflict from the equation, she does not just remove noise, she removes control. And the absence of control creates a quiet discomfort that is far more powerful than confrontation. Control in emotional dynamics is rarely obvious. It often shows up through predictability. When someone knows how you will react, they feel a sense of command over the situation. Arguments become familiar territory. Even emotional upset becomes a known pattern. Once a woman stops engaging in conflict, that predictability disappears. Without predictable reactions, emotional leverage is lost. The absence of conflict forces awareness. Conflict allows people to externalize responsibility. Blame can be shifted, justifications can be spoken, and emotions can be projected outward. When conflict ends, there is no external target. The emotional energy has nowhere to go but inward. That inward turn is uncomfortable because it removes the illusion of control over the narrative. Another critical element is that conflict creates relevance. When someone reacts emotionally, it signals investment. Removing conflict removes that signal. Peace communicates disengagement without hostility. This is difficult to dismiss because it does not provoke defense or counterattack. It simply exists calmly and firmly. That calm becomes unsettling because it cannot be manipulated. From a psychological standpoint, conflict maintains a feedback loop. Action leads to reaction, reaction leads to response. This loop keeps both parties emotionally involved. When the loop is broken, the person who relied on it feels the loss of influence. Influence is closely tied to control. Losing it creates a sense of powerlessness, even if it is never consciously acknowledged. Peace also removes emotional bargaining. In conflict, there is often an unspoken negotiation, attention for reaction, engagement for emotion. When a woman chooses peace, she steps out of that negotiation entirely. There is no longer anything to bargain with. This removal is not aggressive, it is definitive. And definitiveness creates discomfort because it signals finality. The lack of conflict also challenges entitlement. Emotional entitlement develops when someone becomes accustomed to access, reactions, or emotional availability. Conflict reinforces entitlement because it confirms continued engagement. Peace removes that confirmation. Without confirmation, entitlement dissolves, leaving behind uncertainty and reflection. Another aspect of control lies in emotional reassurance. Conflict, even when unpleasant, reassures someone that they still matter enough to provoke emotion. When that reassurance disappears, the mind searches for meaning. Peace offers no clues. It does not explain itself. This ambiguity can be deeply unsettling because it removes the ability to interpret or manage the situation. Peaceful disengagement also disrupts dominance patterns. In many emotional dynamics, one person becomes accustomed to setting the emotional tone. Conflict allows that role to continue. When peace enters, the emotional tone is no longer negotiable. It is set internally, not reactively. This shift undermines dominance because it cannot be challenged. Another important factor is the loss of emotional validation. Control often depends on validation, knowing that words, actions, or absence still have impact. Peace removes visible impact. Without visible impact, the sense of control weakens. This weakening can feel like loss, even if it is not labeled as such. The educational insight here is that control thrives on reaction. Without reaction, control has no foundation. Peace is not passive submission, it is active disengagement. It requires discipline, self-awareness, and emotional strength. That strength is often misinterpreted as coldness, but it is actually clarity. Peace also redefines boundaries. Conflict-based boundaries are flexible and emotional. Peace-based boundaries are firm and quiet. They do not need reinforcement through argument. They are enforced through consistency. Consistency removes negotiation, and without negotiation, control cannot exist. Another layer of discomfort comes from the realization that peace is not temporary. Conflict often feels like a phase. Peace feels permanent. That permanence forces acceptance that influence has ended. Acceptance is difficult when control has been lost because it requires surrender. The absence of conflict also exposes dependence. When someone relies on emotional reactions to feel relevant, the lack of those reactions reveals the dependency. This realization can be deeply uncomfortable, leading to internal conflict even in the absence of external conflict. Over time, peace teaches a powerful lesson. Emotional access is a privilege, not a right. When conflict is removed, the relationship dynamic is rewritten. The woman is no longer participating in emotional chaos. She has chosen stability over stimulation. That choice shifts the balance entirely. In the end, the removal of conflict does not create emptiness. It creates clarity. And clarity is threatening to control because it cannot be manipulated. Peace leaves no opening for influence, no handle to pull, no button to press. That is why the absence of conflict is not quiet weakness, it is silent power. Value is often misunderstood. Many people believe value is proven through effort, availability, or emotional sacrifice. In reality, value is revealed through consistency, especially the consistency of peace. When a woman moves on peacefully and sustains that peace over time, it redefines how she is perceived, not through words or explanations, but through presence, stability, and growth. Consistent peace becomes evidence of self-worth, and that evidence reshapes perception in powerful ways. When peace is temporary, it can be dismissed as a phase. When it is consistent, it signals transformation. Consistency tells the mind that the change is real and permanent. This permanence forces a reevaluation of past assumptions. What was once taken for granted now appears different because it is no longer accessible. Consistent peace changes the lens through which value is measured. From a psychological perspective, humans assign value to what feels scarce and stable at the same time. Emotional chaos is abundant, peace is rare. When a woman maintains peace without bitterness, she becomes emotionally scarce. Scarcity increases perceived value, not because of manipulation, but because calm strength is uncommon. That rarity invites respect and curiosity. Consistency also removes confusion. Emotional inconsistency often leads to mixed signals. Peace eliminates those signals entirely. There is no push and pull, no emotional fluctuation. This clarity forces recognition. When someone sees that peace is not conditional or reactive, they understand that it comes from internal alignment, not external circumstances. Consistent peace also demonstrates self-trust. A woman who remains peaceful over time shows that she trusts her decisions. She is not second-guessing or seeking reassurance. That self-trust is a core component of perceived value because it reflects confidence without arrogance. Confidence grounded in peace feels authentic, not performative. Another important aspect is how peace reshapes identity. When a woman no longer defines herself through emotional struggle, she becomes associated with stability. Stability is often underestimated until it is gone. Once gone, its absence is deeply felt. Consistent peace attaches her identity to emotional safety rather than emotional intensity, and emotional safety carries long-term value. Peace also alters comparison. When someone observes a woman thriving peacefully, comparisons naturally arise, not out of jealousy, but out of awareness. Past dynamics are measured against present reality. This comparison often leads to recognition that peace was once present but unprotected. That recognition reframes her worth retroactively. Consistency in peace also builds quiet authority. Authority does not need to be announced. It is felt through presence and boundaries. A woman who consistently chooses peace signals that she will not compromise her well-being for temporary connection. This stance elevates her value because it shows Discernment. Discernment separates high value from high availability. Another educational insight is that consistent peace removes the need for validation. Value increases when validation is no longer sought. Seeking validation places worth in someone else's hands. Peace reclaims it. This reclamation is visible in behavior, choices, and priorities. Over time, this visibility reshapes perception. Peace also influences respect. Respect grows when someone demonstrates self-respect consistently. Occasional self-respect can be questioned. Consistent self-respect cannot. Peace is a daily practice of self-respect. That practice teaches others how to view and treat her without her needing to instruct them. Another layer of redefined value comes from emotional reliability. Peace makes a woman emotionally reliable, not in the sense of availability, but in the sense of stability. Emotional reliability is rare because many people operate from reaction rather than intention. This reliability makes her presence meaningful even in absence. Consistent peace also signals closure. Closure created internally is stronger than closure granted externally. When closure is consistent, it eliminates hope of emotional reentry. This finality forces acceptance, and acceptance reshapes valuation. What is fully closed is often fully appreciated only after the fact. Peace also highlights growth trajectory. A woman who moves on peacefully and continues growing demonstrates forward momentum. Forward momentum increases value because it aligns with purpose. People are naturally drawn to those who are evolving rather than revolving. Evolution commands respect. Another important factor is that peace is non-negotiable. When peace is consistent, it becomes a standard, not a mood. Standards define value. A woman with high standards for her emotional well-being communicates worth without words. That communication is understood even if it is never acknowledged. In the long term, consistent peace becomes legacy. It leaves an impression that outlasts emotional memory. Arguments fade. Reactions are forgotten. Peace endures. That endurance cements value because it is associated with strength, wisdom, and self-mastery. Ultimately, consistent peace does not ask to be recognized. It is recognized. It redefines value not through demand, but through example. An example is the most powerful teacher of all.